I hope you guys enjoy this episode with Van Galt and Lemuria. Be sure to check out her books and everything else she has going on. Check out her YouTube, her links, all that goodness. Show her some love. Tell her the homie Romie and Danunaki Dan sent you. And wake up.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning into today's show. We are rising from the ashes. And we, as the fire tribe, will rise. Awaken our eyes beyond what is seemingly laid upon us. We can extend our consciousness to the further ends of our cosmic understanding. If you enjoy our show and you like the content that we create, make sure to like, subscribe, share with your friends. Hello, everybody. Yes, please do. Also, follow us on Instagram at RFTA Podcast. If you have any questions or concerns, you can email us at risingftashes@yahoo.com. We are exclusively on Alt Media United. Check it out, altmediaunited.com/rising from the ashes. We love y'all so much. Thank you for listening to our show. If you find value in the content, make sure to pay it forward so we can keep it going. The grind to find the knowledge and the truth and to seek beyond the veil of our current understanding to share information. Wake up and rise from the ashes. Wake up.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to
Rising.
From the Ashes. I'm Danunaki Dan.
And I am the homie Romie. Hello, Daniel. How are you?
Hello, man. How's it going, man?
Great,
Excited
dude.
for this part?
Absolutely.
Episode
Finally.
Episode 2 of
Finally.
Atlantis month.
Yes.
Today we're going to be getting into a little bit of Lemuria, though, and history. We're going to be talking to Buddhist author Van Galt. She is known for her Buddhism book series, Buddhist Mandala, Explore Parallel Realities with Sacred Geometry, and Buddhist Mandala, Christ Consciousness of a Multidimensional Merkaba. And she also has a new book in the works called Pyramids, Megaliths, and Tribal Folklores of Asia. We're going to go further down with Lemurian folklore and knowledge and discuss that. Van Galt, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Hi, Roman. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm super excited about this project.
I'm Dan.
Dan, hi.
No worries. Tell the people a little bit about your background into yourself and like what made you write these books and everything and get into this line of research.
Well, my origins for how I got into writing Buddhism books, it really just comes from my heritage. So I'm Laotian, and I was born into the Buddhist heritage. And basically growing up, I got bored at temple. Most of the material taught at temple is the basics, how to be a nice person, how not to be a douchebag, how not to ruin your life, etc. It's the basic stuff that people should already know, but they're still learning over again.
Mm-hmm.
So I got bored of that. And so what I typically would do all growing up is I would look at and study the folklores and study the artwork and on all the temples of all the different Buddhist temples I went to throughout the United States, and then also the ones in Laos, which my parents helped fund the construction of the artwork. And a lot of the artwork tells a story, and there's a lot of folklore around the artwork. And as I got older, I just didn't think anything of it. They're just anecdotal stories to help you be a nice person. But as I got older in college, I started following, when social media came about, I started following my favorite teachers like Dalai Lama and just different researches going on about consciousness, mindfulness, meditation, and just different quantum physics, all that. And what I ended up gathering was information that supported my thesis that Buddhist mandalas, this energy field, is the vessel of consciousness that takes you between different parallel realities that match up with your personal resonance. And so I used the folklores that I had learned growing up in these different Buddhist monasteries, talking to the different student monks who be questioning the little girl that's sitting by herself for hours studying these pictures, because all the other kids are doing other things. And I was able to prove through the Buddhist Mandala series the science behind how we are energy, and as energy we have dominion over our reality and which timelines and which parallel realities we go into. So that book right there was based off of Buddhist folklore. The other side of Buddhist folklore is there is a rich history of Buddhist folklore that goes into the origins of the people of Southeast Asia, which is supposedly from a lost empire of Mu, or what we would call Lemuria, from the Pacific coast. And a lot of those imagery is about the mega flood that happened over 10,000 years ago, and what happened in the diaspora of the people. And over time, the people, as Buddhism came into the area, the people would wrap their folklores and their oral storytelling of their ancestry and their old civilizations and whatnot into the artwork that they would paint in their sacred temples, because the sacred temples, the Buddhist temples or the Hindu temples, are where most of the money go into, because that's the communal recreation area, and that's where they tell story, that's where they learn, that's where they do functions. Is a community center. So so when you go into any Buddhist or Hindu temple, you see a lot of folklores and imagery all over, and they're not just pretty pictures. They actually have information in them, and if you have the eyes to see and do the research, just like how I followed the folklores of Buddhist mandalas and prove that it's real, I will be proving that the pyramids and the megaliths of all the Pacific Islands are remnants of the Lemurian Empire, which is documented in Buddhist folklores and artwork. And if we prove the Lemurian Empire is true based on its folklores, there is the story that Lemuria had a war between another great civilization called the Atlantis Empire. Okay, and there isn't much information about the Atlantis Empire that you can prove that Atlantis really existed besides Plato. But there is a lot of information proving Lemuria existed. And I aim to prove that in my book project, Pyramids, Megaliths, and Tribal Folklores of Asia. And we'll go into how I go to proving that. So
excellent. I have a few questions just off the top. Can you tell us what a Merkaba or a Merkaba is for the people out there that may not know what that word means?
Yeah. So, and this is some basic consciousness groundwork for going into Pyramids, Megaliths, and Tribal Folklores of Asia, that book project that I've been working on. Because when you go into these sacred sites and these ancient sites, and you go further into it, you see a lot of imagery and a lot of technology revolving around enlightenment and a connection to consciousness, to source in our experience here in this holographic reality. And so you have to have a basic understanding of consciousness, because that's what a lot of these ancient temples revolve their material around. So your Merkaba is the word Merkaba is basically a Jewish word for your energy field. In modern science, they call it your toroidal field. In Japan, they call it your yin yang. In Buddhism, they call it your mandala because it looks like mandala. In Hinduism, they call it your Sri Yantra. But we have many, many different names. It's just basically your aura field. And your aura field is you. You could actually take a picture of your aura field. In the book, there's a website called soundmadevisible.com where anybody can send a recording of their voice, and it will automatically show a picture of what that voice looks like. And everybody's is unique. Mine has lions in it, so.
Damn, that's super cool.
Well, yeah, because when I talk, it's the roar of the lion, and
Are you a Leo?
the teacher.
Yes.
I am also a Leo.
Yeah.
And my voice has lions in my mandala. So it's in the books as well. But in Buddhism, because there's a lot of lion iconology, the teacher is the lion.
Yes.
Wow. So
Everybody has one. Everybody
one.
has one. Yeah. Well, everybody has a lion in there. It just has to be brought forth. So
we had a really great conversation last month. Was dedicated to the divine feminine and what that means and different spiritual beliefs. And we had a really great conversation with this lady named Aurora, who claims to be a walk-in, meaning that the body of the human that she is encapsulated in now actually was on the deathbed from a head injury. And she basically, her soul came in and is Aurora now. And what she describes, how she goes from dimension to dimension, is called what she calls a flying rainbow lasagna. Speaking of it as like a Merkaba of sorts or a mandala, and she claims that that's how she was able to go from her dimensional reality to come to this physical.
Yeah. Your Merkaba, or your energy field. It is, when you read Buddhist mandalas, and I want to preface everybody, Buddhist mandalas, you don't have to be really scientific. You don't have to be really mathematical. I write it in very simple terms so everybody can understand. And even if you have absolutely no knowledge, you can go into the material and come out, with a better understanding of your energy field. But your energy field is a portal. Okay. It is designed like a portal. It's a portal. All your chakras are mini portals, and then all together it makes kind of like, it looks like an apple. It's a toroidal field. But when you look at it from the top view, it looks like a yin yang, because that's how the energies move. If you take a picture of your voice, it looks like a mandala. So there's a lot of different ways. We're talking about the same thing. We're just seeing it from different points of view. But it's basically a portal. And the way in which you navigate your portal is through consciousness, is through your level of consciousness to the greater reality of source, God, whatever, Allah, whatever you want to call it. And also it is your intentions. Like, what do you intend? Do you want to experience next? And so a lot of it is about getting clear of what you want to experience next, and then cleaning up the dramas. So if you want to keep somebody into a lower frequency of reality, you continue to feed them fear, dramas, melodramas, problems. And so they never fix it. And so they never go anywhere. But if they understand how they create things and they fix it, then they know they're much wiser in not recreating the old dense issues that hold back their Merkaba into jumping into the next best experience, into another timeline, into another parallel reality that is of a higher resonance, that have more preferable experiences. Okay. I don't say that one timeline is better than another timeline. They're just more preferred than others.
Mm-hmm.
But for some people, they need the lower timeline, they need the lower reality, because that is the level of consciousness that they're at, and they need those life lessons to learn and grow from, so that when they get into the better ones, they can appreciate it much more, instead of repeating the same old bad habits over and over again, and not, jumping through the portal.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Your Merkaba is your portal.
Yes.
Okay.
It's your vehicle, your spiritual vehicle of transportation.
Exactly. And when you get into ancient folklores, a lot of the ancient folklores talk about your portal, your Merkaba.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about consciousness. They talk about the heart resonance. They talk about your spiritual connection to source. They talk about the reality being malleable and changeable. And everybody does this. It's just not paying attention. We're basically driving around drunk with not sober.
Yeah.
But if you ever had the experience of what they call Mandela Effect, or we just call it shifting parallel realities, where you are going, wait a minute, that car was blue. It's always been blue, but now all of a sudden it's red, and everybody says it's red. Wait a minute, why is my husband's eyes all of a sudden brown when it's always been blue? And he even remembers it being blue, but now all of a sudden it's brown. Those kind of nuances.
Oh, weird.
Okay, there's a lot of tests online, like, do you remember the Berenstein Bears versus the Berenstain Bears? You know what you grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember Publishers Clearinghouse having Ed McMahon deliver the prize van and everything? I remember that. I watched it all the time growing up. My dad was crazy about Reader's Digest lottery, so that he can get the prize van at Ed McMahon showing up. You've just won $1 million. What are you going to do? But in this reality, that's never happened. The prize van was not from Publishers Clearinghouse. It was from American Family Publishers or something like that.
Yeah.
But those kind of nuances explain that there are people from different realities merging into this existing reality, and now we have two different memories of different realities in this reality. Okay, that's an example of consciousness merging.
Yes.
Okay, and so there's multiple ways to get to the same outcome, and that's an example of that. But in Buddhism, we just talk about it in terms of shifting your attention, your intention, your consciousness, and working through those life challenges, and creating with a much more clear picture of what you want next. And that's how you use your Merkaba to jump from one version of reality to another. You do it in a level of consciousness. Okay, so I don't want to get too far into Buddhist mandalas, because we can go forever about Buddhist mandalas. We're going to go into the pyramids and Megaliths book project.
Yes, and we should start it off with a chronology of sorts, a timeline. Can you give us a visualization of picture a timeline of this beautiful land of Lemuria?
Yeah, like, what is Lemuria? Where is it located? When did this kind of civilization exist, and when was its downfall, kind of in a nutshell?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure of a nutshell. It's a long story, but I'll try to give you
one nutshell.
Yeah, I'll try to give you a rundown. So, just really quick background. So, what eventually got me into this is I went with my mother in, ironically, 2012. 2012. Which is the year 2555 in the Buddhist era calendar, as a year of changeover from one cycle of Earth's history to another cycle. It's just a changeover of energy into a higher dimension. And so 2012. So they had just finished some artwork, and so I went with my mother to her latest temple to go and see what they did with the money. And I, of course, did my usual. Just studied the new art. And as I was going there, I was like, oh, they touched up on some of the mega flood artwork about giants and mermaids and what happened to the people in terms of that folklore of the diaspora after the mega flood. And so I kind of studied that again. And then I went and I also went to the Plain of Jars in Laos. They have this valley of like hundreds, if not more, of these huge megalithic jars, which is 2 or 3 times taller than the average human. And there was an a amateur archaeologist that came in through for like a stint and saw a couple of human bones and said, "Oh, it's a burial mound." But that's not the story according to the locals. The legend and the folklores that I grew up with was that the Plain of Jars was remnants of kind of like a Super Bowl party from some giants that had won a war or settled a war, but it was just a celebration after a war. And that's why they had lids and they look like cups and they're all over the place. But that's the story. But of course, that's just folklore, a bunch of giants having a Super Bowl party after a war. But the evidence is there. So nobody really knows the true origins because, again, when you go beyond modern times when people can read and write, most of the stuff is folklore. And folklore is documented in an illiterate society from artwork. Okay, so I have to understand that. So anyways, I went there and then I went to Wat Phu, which is a very large temple in Laos. And it is a small copy of Angkor Wat in Cambodia. And if you
that's fucking sorry, that's really cool though. I love Angkor Wat. I love those architectures, just mind melting.
Angkor Wat is the big sister, but if you look from Angkor Wat and you look towards Laos, it's the little sister, which is Wat Phu, which is a very mini version of it. But when I was at Wat Phu and I was studying, of course, the artwork because I'm an artist, and I was studying the artwork, all of the doorways are just huge. They're like 3 or 4 times taller than I am. I'm about 5'4". So I'm like, oh, okay, why? And I asked the people, and they're like, oh, we don't really know. But my mom used to go there when she was a kid, and basically the folklore from the locals of Wat Phu is that the people are much taller. They're like giants. They're much taller. That's why the doorways are like 3 or 4 times taller than the average human. All the doorways, because the ancient temples have taller doorways because that reflects the height of the people. But over time, they got smaller and smaller. So that's the folklore. So I was like, well, that's interesting. And then I go to another monument in Laos, and this is all by my mother and father's village in northern Laos, which is kind of a Hmong village. A Hmong tribal village. So I went to the Tomu monument. And the Tomu monument is very, very small. The doorways are really small, so it's a newer temple. And the folklore around that one is that there was this couple, and the husband, the king of this small little tribe, he decided to go do his spiritual retreat. And so he went to Mount Kilish. Okay. And Mount Kilish over in Tibet, the folklore of Mount Kilish is that time travels very, very fast there. So one day could be months or years outside of it. Okay. That's the folklore. If you go, there's a portal in Mount Kilish. If you know where to find that portal, you go into that portal and then you go into kind of what the folklore is Shambhala. And that's where all the enlightened beings, live and study. And anyways, this king went to Mount Kilish and he thought he was just going to be there for a couple months. Well, in the real world, in Laos, his wife waited 1,000 years for him, according to the folklore. But then she heard a rumor that he had died, and so she was so sad that she killed herself. Well, he came back a couple months later after his spiritual retreat. A couple months in Mount Kilish is 1,000 years in real time. And he came back and found that she had killed herself. So he was really sad. But then he had saw this little girl that he swears is a reincarnation of his wife. And remember, he hasn't aged. It's only been a couple months, so he hasn't aged. So they got married and they lived off their life. But that's Mount Tomu. So I'm seeing, going to Laos, all this information about these folklores, which I grew up with, but I wasn't old enough to really look at it from an archaeological perspective and as you know, an evaluating perspective. As a kid, you just run around and play. We play tag and that's it. So, but then I got home and I got my DNA ancestry report that I had sent, and I got a gift. And I was curious about, I got the gift because I was curious about my mother. She had blonde hair growing up, and then her eyes turned brown and her blonde hair turned dark brown. And then my cousin in Laos, one of my cousins, she had blonde hair, brown eyes. And so I was just kind of curious, well, maybe we have some white in our genes. Okay, you have Hmong. And so I got the DNA ancestry report back, and I found that I had 14% Polynesian. And no one in my family knows anybody who ever lived in the islands, because we've always, as long as anybody remembers, have lived in Laos. We're from the Laos tribe of Hmong. And then the rest of it is completely Asian. And there was absolutely no Caucasian in my DNA. And I argued with them, and they said, no, there's no Caucasian in you at all. And I said, well, then why is my mom and my cousin blonde hair? And my mother had blue eyes. And the representative who was looking at the report said, well, we do have some people from Laos who have that in their genes. And it's the same. Are you Laos? And are you from the Hmong tribe? And I said, oh, yeah, I am. I'm from northern Laos. And so I'm like, oh yeah, okay. So then I talked to my mother, and she said, well, yeah, we're from the Hmong tribe, and the Hmong tribe, that's normal. Every couple of generations, you're going to get a blonde blue eye baby, and everybody's Laotian. And I was like, oh, well, is that from the Polynesian Islands? Because we're supposedly 14%. And she said, oh yeah, this is from Lemuria. So it was just kind of matter of fact. I was like, well then, why don't you guys tell us this? Why don't you tell us about it? She's like, well, technically you're not supposed to say anything because we could all gotten killed in Laos if we were talking about this and identify ourselves as Hmong, because the Hmong tribe during the Vietnam War were kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. They're like Native Americans in America. All right. So the Native Laotians who haven't really gotten sovereignty, haven't been recognized over the eons, and they happen to be part of the Laos country. And they had these foreigners who had a war, and they didn't want these foreigners to die on their sacred land that has been unrecognized, these Americans. And so they would protect the Americans from sniper attack and whatnot, just to protect their land. And as a result, they got stuck between a rock and a hard place. And so a lot of them had to seek political asylum to leave the country or be re-educated, my family being one of them. And so we just don't talk about us being Hmong or part of the folklore of Lemuria, because it puts a marker on us because of modern warfare in the area. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. Now my interest is piqued. And that's how I started going, okay, well, I did follow the folklores for Buddhist mandalas and prove that it was real. Let me look at the folklores of all of the material that I saw in Laos, and using the folklores as a treasure map, let's see if this mega flood folklore of Lemuria is true. So according to this folklore, over 10,000 years ago, most of the people of Southeast Asia, and especially Laos, or the Hmong people from our tribe, were descendants of the Lumerian Empire. But when the mega flood came, the only people who survived were the ones who either got into boats, or they were the ones who were able to escape to the very tippy tops of where they lived on the empire. And when the flood came through, it created a bunch of islands. But on the tippy tops are going to be remnants of their culture, like a pyramid or megalith, something some kind of remnant of their culture. And so that's the folklore. And then when the waters receded, people slowly over time went back to living in the valleys and carried on their life and try to recreate their culture. But the folklore of Lemuria is that we were all giants, and that we were highly spiritual and highly technological. But the technology is so advanced that it basically is hidden within the culture, so it looks very artistic and very organic. And it existed at the same time as another folklore, which is Atlantis. But unlike Atlantis, according to that folklore, was different from Lemuria in that the Atlanteans were a little bit envious of Lemuria because we were highly spiritual, and a lot of the Lemurian people had highly evolved sixth senses because they were connected in consciousness of source.
You know, I've always had that vibe. I thought Atlantis was kind of like the Greek, the Greek, like, snubby, uppy types. And I always had a feeling, an intuitive feeling that Lemurians were just like vibes and just complete, utter connection to everything that the earth had to offer. Like I always just kind of like had that vibe.
Yeah, and that's according to the folklores. That is the folklores that's been told over and over again in Laos and in many tribes, that we have a common link to Mu, and Mu is, again, highly technological, but the technology is very organic. It's not very robotic, and the Mu peoples, they had a very clear connection to source, God, consciousness, whatever. They understood their place in creation, and because they're so spiritual, they also understood their abilities within the holographic matrix and their sixth senses, and they were responsible. One of the very big things about the Mu people is to be responsible with your spiritual sixth senses and be responsible with technology. But the counterculture, which they didn't see as enemies, they didn't see us Atlantis as enemies at all. They saw them as, just another culture, another friend. They didn't think anything of it. The counterculture of Atlantis was very technical, and because they weren't as spiritually connected to source, they kind of made their technology their gods. That's according to the folklore. And the technology ended up creating a lot of havoc in their cultures because they were, doing genetic modifications. They were, it was just taking over their ethics, and there wasn't enough people with wisdom to divert where they were going to go. But with Lemuria, the elders, they had a lot of respect for the elders and the wisdom keepers, to prevent us from basically letting our ego take over and take the best of us. But as a result, the folklore is that Atlantis and Lemuria had a duke out, but it didn't completely kill Atlantis or Lemuria. What killed Lemuria was the mega flood.
Was the flood caused by technology overdose? Like that's kind of like one of the ongoing, like there was like so much of this like resonance technology happening that maybe it was an attack through resonance. And what's the folklore tell us about how it started? Because we know about the deluge from all over the world. We know about deluge, but how did this deluge come about?
We don't really, the folklores don't really say much about how it started. If you look at, and everything I say is completely substantiated by the folklores and the art in the area. But basically, they just, all the monks growing up, and the ones still just say, oh, it happened over 10,000 years ago. It happened, it was just a big flood that just took out everything, and it went across the whole world. So right around the same time as it took out Lemuria, it probably took out Atlantis at the same time. It was a worldwide flood that just took out everything. Only thing that was left over were the ones who was able to make it to tippy tops. The reason why there's still remnants of Lemuria available at the top of these islands is because Lemuria was so high, had a high altitude. Atlantis may not have had a high enough altitude, which is why there's nothing left in that area to prove its existence. The way in which we prove the existence of Atlantis folklore is proving the existence of the Lemurian folklores, which I will prove. So what did I do? So I started going, okay, well, if this folklore is true, let's see what's around existing. So I'm going to list out a couple of the remnant artifacts, and if you live in this area, go see it. But most people don't because they're really remote. So I first started with Tonga, the island of Tonga, and because they're the closest to the Hmong tribe, and they have a megalith arch called the Ha'amanga Amawi. Okay, Ha'amanga Amawi. And the ancient capital is the city of Mu'a for Lemuria. Okay. And so I was like, well, that's interesting. It's the same Hmong names. So that I was like, well, there's some plausibility. That's where my 14% Polynesian came from. Also, in the tribes of Tonga, Maui, there's the name that Maui's one man, but also Maui, there's another folklore that Maui is just kind of a name for these 4 superhuman brothers who were giants, and they all were named Maui or referred to as Maui. The brothers, the Maui brothers, they were really interested in helping humanity gain consciousness and their superhuman abilities. And I know from my work of sixth sense consultation that when you attain consciousness and you raise your frequency and you become more awakened within the holographic reality and your Merkaba is fully activated, you do activate six senses. I have clients all over the world that I talk to about their budding, evolving six senses. So it is true. But that's Tonga. So I was like, check. The very top of the Tonga Islands is a megalith. Let's go to the next one. So we go to Indonesia. Indonesia, the very top of the islands, if this folklore is true, something's going to be there. Yes, there is something. The Bada Valley of megalithic jars. And these look just like the jars of Laos, almost exact, if you look at it. There's also these megalithic statues, and they're basically wanking themselves. And according to the folklore, okay, they have their hands are underneath their pants, and they're basically wanking themselves. So it's kind of funny. So I'm like, well, that's interesting. What's the folklore behind that? And I talked to some elders, and they said basically the folklore is that there was a king who had anxiety of the war going on, the war of giants. The king was a giant. And so they erected all these wanking statues facing the palace, where there's a pyramid, facing the palace just to make him laugh so that he can not have so much anxiety from this war going on. So I said, well, that's interesting. So that's Indonesia.
It's like a comic picturing the audience naked, or somebody on stage picturing the audience naked so they don't feel self-conscious about what they're doing.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's Indonesia. You look further into the next island, the Philippines. Okay, so I'm like, let's go to the Philippines. The other thing also, one more thing about Indonesia is that in Indonesia, there is a large pyramid on the very top of Indonesia. It's called Ganang Padang. Mm-hmm. And it's supposedly 25,000 years old. It's a step pyramid. Now, the government doesn't want anybody, because they started doing some excavation and started seeing that there was a shaft that goes straight down, and they wanted to send something down to see what's inside the pyramid, but then the government stopped it. So there isn't much excavation or research being done on that pyramid right now because the government's just preventing people from inspecting it. They're afraid it's going to break, or we're going to break it, or whatever. But anyways, there is a 25,000-year-old step pyramid in Indonesia. So that checks with the other folklore of the king that lived in another megalithic structure like a pyramid or somewhere around there that needed those wanking statues to calm his nerves about the war that's going on. So I go to the Philippines, and the Philippines, they have something too. At the very top of their mountains, they have what they call the Chocolate Hills. And the Chocolate Hills are conical. And there are these thousands of hills. If you go to the park there, there's an overlook to see these hills. They all look like cones on the hillside, and they're huge hills. They're almost like mountains. But basically, the folklore is that there was a war between giants, and they were throwing rocks, and the rocks built up, and they started piling up like these conical shapes. But the giants, they had a truce, and they kind of got over their senses, and so to celebrate the end of the war, they went elsewhere to go party, kind of go have a Super Bowl party. Okay. And some of them stayed here to party in Indonesia or in the Philippines in this area, and some went elsewhere. So where have I heard of a Super Bowl party of giants? Laos, the Plain of Jars.
Yeah.
So we had the Plain of Jars. The Plain of Jars.
Yo, there's something to the top of that step pyramid there that I've been doing some research called resonant architecture, just to try to like pull all the crazy architecture buildings that are souped up to the Earth's grid, you know. And there's something to that bell shape. Do you know anything about the actual shape of the bell, like in folklore stories? Because I know the Vimanas are a big part of that talk, you know, that the tops of these buildings were actually able to come off and be transportation devices. Is there any folklore resonating to that, or do you know much about Vimanas?
Yes, I do. And when we get to the part where I talk about the Ural Mountain Pyramid in Russia, that's where I end this book series, because that's where I stop at Eurasia for the Asia book series, and it stops right at the Ural Mountains. So I'll table that for a little bit. But
that's
just
so
to
fascinating. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Just to run through this really quickly. So the Philippines has the conical hills, and there's a folklore right there which completely corroborates the folklores of Laos about the Super Bowl party. So they had a Super Bowl party to celebrate the end of the war in the Bata Valley in Indonesia with those megalithic jars, and they had an even bigger one. The best party was in Laos, and right now, if you go to Laos, you can go to that site and see thousands of megalithic jars. Jump inside of them, get a rope, pull yourself outside of them, have some fun. But that's the folklore. So Indonesia and Laos and the Philippines, their folklores match each other. So then I went to another island. I went to the Sumba Islands. And we're going to smaller islands because there's a lot of small islands that dot along the Pacific coastline, because this is all one, according to folklore, all one empire. But what was left over are these little islands after the water hit them all. And there's thousands of dolmens, and those dolmens are just basically huge megalithic structures. Okay, that's a Soma. The Nias Islands also has folklores of how the megalithic structures were built. And basically, the Nias Islands, the locals say, yeah, it was built by giants that used to live here. But what's left, but they don't know how it was built. They just have stories. They use levitation technology. They were giants, so it's easy to move things and create things. But that's their stories. Very straightforward, the Nias Islands. But they don't have the information or knowledge to work with it anymore. It's not been passed along. Once the giant elders passed away, the knowledge passed with them, because they're kind of illiterate. They didn't have literature yet. And so anyways, but they do use the megalithic structures as a rite of passage. So when boys reach a certain age, if they can jump across these megalithic structures, that is a rite of passage. So that's how they use it nowadays. So that island checks. Easter Island checks as well. I was just following the folklore as a treasure map. If it's true, There's going to be something on top of these islands, all these big islands along the coast, the coastline of the Pacifics. And Easter Island has it. They have the Moa statues, full bodies.
Yep.
Okay.
And those
there's
connect
also
to Göbekli Tepe.
yeah. There's also a pyramid on top of Easter Island. It's a pyramid at Rapa Iti. Okay. So check. They also have the Vanapu megalithic walls, which is these huge walls, which they're megalithic walls that are airtight when they on the seams. So same technology all over. Technology of the giant ones. So Easter Island, check. I went over to Samoa, looked at that. There's Nan Madol megalithic city along a coral reef area. And there's two folklores around Nan Madol. Nan Madol, the first one is there were giants seafaring people that resettled there. And the chiefs of the islands are often large and they're descendants of the elder ones of Nan Madol. That's the first one. They're just seafaring people that settled there after a mega flood. The second folklore of Nan Madol is that there were two giant brothers that escaped the mega flood. And they started it. One died, the other ended up marrying a local woman. And of course they had kids, and those kids became the chiefs of the islands. Now, some of the chiefs of the islands, if you look at these, the chiefs, they have blonde or red hair. And of course, when you talk to the locals and the elders of Samoa, when it comes to Nan Madol, they basically said, no, we found it here. We didn't build it. It was here already. We found it. And we just started, using it. Most people don't go into it because they're very suspicious and they, kind of paranoid about the energy of the area.
How do you feel about going in places like that? Is it kapu or no?
For me being potentially a descendant of Lemuria, from the Hmong culture, and knowing what I know, when I go to these areas, I've actually I get a sense and a communication from the elders in the areas. I have psychic sixth senses, and so when it just kind of comes on, and they kind of show me, look at this one, whatever. And I'm like, oh, well, that's great. I'm starting to get hungry. I want to go have lunch. So my human nature comes in. So anyways, but that's typically what happens. But when I go to these places, you have to bring drones with you to fly over, go in close, go under, take video, whatever. And a lot of these places are so remote that it's really hard to get to it. So you can't even hike into it. You need a drone. And you need a couple of good drones, a backup drone as well, with a lot of backup battery just to be able to get footage, because you're not going to get pictures. And you're not going to get, and so there isn't that many pictures because people don't venture into these areas. But when we plan on going for copyright issues, because when I'm creating the book, when I started my research, I was just doing internet research going, well, here's the folklore, let's see if it's true. And 100% of the time, every single big island has a pyramid or megalith. So it's proving the Buddhist folklore of Lemuria to be true. I've never looked at a folklore, and 100% of the time, I found evidence to substantiate it. Okay, so that's Nan Madol. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the chiefs of the Fiji Islands and the Lau Islands, which I thought was funny. They even have an island called Lau. But in the Polynesians, a lot of the chiefs are about 8 feet tall. And they're smaller mini versions of the original elders of Lemuria, of the empire. You go to Australia, there's the Gympie pyramids with Gosford hieroglyphs in there. Okay, you go to, and that's the top of Australia. You go to New Zealand, top of New Zealand is the Kamari Awa Wall, and there's also, they have these huge Meraki boulders on the beach, more megalithic structures there. You go to Hawaii, and there's the Wainea Pyramid on top of the Wainea Valley, Oahu. It's really hard to track in there. That's why you have to have drones that go miles in. Mm-hmm. You just go as close as you possibly can, and then you start the drone. So a lot of the children who love the drone stuff, this is your homework. You're gonna have fun with this. So that's, and then if you go to Japan, you got Uniguni Step Pyramid.
Yes.
It was underneath the water, not far off the coast, but even on the island of Japan around Uniguni, there's megalithic structures all over the island, just kind of scattered all over the place. But Uniguni is huge, and there's that.
Can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
Are you a supporter of like Kumari Kandam?
Describe again a little bit further.
Kumari Kandam is like this lost continent that they believe the top of it touched India, and
that's a different empire.
Okay, so that's not what you think the Lemuria Empire was.
No, that's a completely different empire.
Okay.
So yeah.
What is the stretch of the Lumerian Empire? Is that's just the Philippines area of all these islands off of southern China and out towards the Pacific, towards Hawaii?
The Lemaria Empire, according to the folklore, is basically the whole Pacific.
Okay.
Yeah, like I imagine it being big. I mean, it's stretching all the way to Australia, all the whole islands, the Aleutian island chain, which is all sunken underwater, was probably Lemuria. And then let us not forget California, baby. California was a motherfucking. There's so much Lemurian folklore happening out here.
Yeah,
Mount Shasta is a part of that too, because people, don't like to talk about it, but California was an island, and there's maps of that as well.
Yeah. The thing with the Americas, I'm not sure if I'm going to be around living long enough to cover, a book series. I'll start with Pyramids and Megaliths and Tribal Folklores of Asia. And then when I go up to Asia, just finish off Asia, I end up at where Eurasia ends. And that's that book is the Asia one. But there's so much content from Russia, China, and Tibet that's its own little book series, the own book. So I don't just have to split it up because in China, there's a Chinese pyramids there. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to go there and take those copyright-free pictures and the area of drone videos there because China doesn't want anybody to know about this stuff. It completely throws everything out in terms of history with the pyramids and our current understanding of origin from the Bible, which begins around the pyramids. But then you go into the Chinese pyramids, and they've been around for even longer. And you go to the 25,000-year-old pyramid in Indonesia, and it starts throwing history completely into zonks, and they don't want to open that can of worms up. But if I ever do have the ability to do that, I will go to the China one. But China has a bunch of pyramids, a lot of megalithic structures in China, and then you go into Russia.
Yeah.
You go into Russia, and you get the Ural Mountains, and there's a big pyramid in Ural Mountains. In 2020, some tourists ended up discovering it, and because they decided we want to go into the Ural areas and explore the mysteries of Ural Mountains. And a lot of the locals don't want to go there because they are afraid of just superstition that they have around the Ural Mountains. There's a lot of giant megalithic elements there. But what was fascinating is the Ural Mountains is that they found a coral, a spiral, a nanospiral tool that you can only see in microscopic. And it was dated to be, according to the scientific tests of it, it was dated to be 100,000 to 300,000 years old. So there was a culture of potentially giants, according to the folklore, that was of advanced technology, maybe 100,000 to 300,000 years old. Okay, that's in the Ural Mountains, and I would love to go to the Ural Mountains, but that's remote. I would love to go that. I love a good helicopter tour. And then Tibet, of course, you have Mount Kailash, which goes around the folklores of Shambhala and all the folklores around Mount Kailash, of the ancient ones residing there in through a portal into their dimension. So these are folklores. I'm just repeating folklores, but I like to match the folklores up with the evidence.
Do you think the Earth? What do you think about the Earth as a whole, like as a celestial living being, and how do you view the planet that we're on?
Well, from the science that I've documented in my book Buddhist Mandala series, the Earth is a living being. She's conscious and she is of high frequency, and she's already moved on to a fifth dimensional or higher level of consciousness.
Do you think there's pockets within the Earth? Like I would love for this to be true, because this feels so warm and bubbly to me, that this there was a flood that happened, and maybe there's caverns inside the Earth where there's heightened energy and resonance going on, and that we have some of our ancestors living inside the Earth. Is there any tales of like volcanoes, having access to that, or anywhere in Lemuria having access to any sort of craterous or hollow Earth?
According to the Buddhist folklores, I don't have any of that. I don't know all the Buddhist folklores. Okay, there's a lot. But it's like 2,000 years of folklore, so I don't know. And but I know from what I know, there is a portal point in Mount Kailash in Tibet. It only is visible and open to people who know where it is. And even if you know where it is, it's only open to people who are of high frequency. Their Merkaba, their energy field has to be a high enough resonance to match and see the gateway to go in. Okay,
that seems to be the story there.
Yeah. So if you just like the Mount Tumu monument with the king of that small kingdom in Laos, who went there just to go homage for a couple months and just learn from the teachers there. Same exact thing. You have to be a high frequency. And his wife, she lived supposedly according to the folklore for 1,000 years, which means that she is of high frequency to be able to have such good health for such a long period of time. Because your health is connected to your spiritual health, your consciousness level. So everything that I have proven from following the folklores of Buddhist mandalas and put it in with scientific evidence to back up, our energy is our energy field and consciousness that dictate which version of reality we experience. It also opens up to different things in that reality that are of that energy frequency. So the thing is that you can, let's say hypothetically, like the Nazis, for example, they stomped through Tibet and try to find what they could from the folklores, and they can go in there all they want. It's not going to open up for them because they have low frequency. They're not of of Christ consciousness, which is a crystalline consciousness of a higher vibrating Merkaba. So they can stomp all they want. It's not going to open for them. They can bring somebody who have a high frequency, and it'll open up for them, and that person can walk right through according to the folklores, but they won't be able to.
I love that. I love what you just said there, the crystalline energy, because I was just reading one of my favorite books last night, and it's trying to understand alchemy more, because the more I understand alchemy on a cosmological alchemy, or however, just to understanding the matter more, and materials that we're surrounded with, and trying to get the spirit to that too. And I read the term sulfur sun, and then like in parentheses was Jesus next to it. I was like, wow, like thinking about Jesus or Christ, these like this energy, these words that get tossed around. And then I had a vision of it being like just a material, like a thought material, or like a thought pattern, but that connects to, and a crystalline just works really well. I'm sorry, there's a lot of scattered thought there.
No, in my book 2 of Buddhist mandalas, Christ consciousness of a multidimensional Merkaba. I go into the distinction of Yeshua ben Yosef, or what you guys call Jesus Christ in the Bible canon. He is the Christ, but he is of Christ consciousness. Okay, and it's an energy level of consciousness that you connect with source energy. Okay, so let me see. Yeah. So and in Buddhism, we have our own documentations in our canon of Yeshua ben Yosef being taught consciousness, metaphysics, and just kind of how to harness his crystalline energy for energy healing.
Isa.
So, yeah, his name is Isa. So, in Islam they called him Isa, but or Yeshua is his real name. And so, anyways, there's a whole thing on Miriam of Magdala, which is his wife, and the 3 children and their life in India with his Buddhist monastery there. But but it fills in a lot of the gaps in Western canon about what happened to Yeshua before and after the crucifixion, and kind of the rest of his life. So I've had a lot of people tell me that reading that part gave them a lot of healing about the topic of Yeshua.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful.
But Christ is Christala, and it's basically break down the word Christ which is Christala or crystalline consciousness. It's Ka-Ra Asa La, which is the 7 sacred geometric tones in creation in your
Oh my goodness.
Mer, Ka,
That's mind-meltingly. Ooh.
Okay, so Mer is light, Ka is spirit, and Ba is body. Okay.
Yes.
Your Christ body is your Mer, Ka, Ba.
Beautiful.
Ka-Ra Asa La. Okay, does it make sense?
Yeah.
The knowledge.
The music too. That's like Python.
Yes. Yes.
Very ancient goodness right there.
Yeah. Nobody discovers anything new. They just find old stuff.
Yes.
Okay, and then they come up with their own interpretations and come up with their own like conspiracies and whatever. So, but I always go back to early.
Do you have any good folklore stories on serpents in Lemuria and serpents in Asia? Like, we love serpent symbology around here.
Yeah. So when I was at Laos, at one of my mom's recent monastery artwork, I studied the artwork of the mermaids of the area, and in Lemuria, according to those folklores that they have depicted in basically all the artwork in many Buddhist temples and canon, is that we lived with the mermaids. There was another civilization of highly advanced mermaids, and they would live in peace with the Lemurian giants and the Lemurian people. But when the mega flood happened, some of the mermaids kind of supposedly help save some of the people, but most of the people ended up perishing because they couldn't make it to the highlands fast enough. But that's all we have of the mermaids. But the mermaids stay away from us after the mega flood, just because it was a long time before civilization repaired itself. You go from advanced civilization to how do you make a hut all over again?
Yeah.
That is really, really heavy. But also, I was lucky enough to live out on the Big Island for about 8 years, and I'm fascinated with Polynesian culture, and it's like the most beautiful, amazing spirit and voices too. Like, I mean, some of these uncles that can just sing in harmony and harmonize like 4 at a time. You're just you're like, you guys are angels. You're singing angels. It's crazy, mesmerizing. Anyways, I heard of a lot of beautiful mermaid stories.
Oh, they have lots of beautiful mermaid stories. Now, mermaids are just like humans. There's good ones and there's bad ones, quote, quote, bad in parentheses. But there's mischievous ones that like to play jokes. I mean, there's a lot of stories about, in Laos about mermaids falling in love with a man, or a man falling in love with a mermaid. And just a whole bunch of mermaid stories. That can be a whole different book of mermaid folklores. But yes, in Buddhist artwork in all the temples, they do have artwork about the Mermaid Empire. There was a lot of empires, but the biggest empires, according to Buddhist artwork, is Lemuria, and it got taken down by the mega flood, and as well as their sister civilization on Earth at the time, which is Atlantis, got taken down by the mega flood. Now, I live in Washington, okay? Now, this, I think John Hancock, or not John Hancock, but Graham Hancock, yeah, he's really, I recommend people go into his work because he's really good at the Americas. And the Americas is a merging of Atlantis folklores and giants from there, and Lemurian folklores and giants from there. It's a melting pot because it's between the two.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Okay. So that's why sometimes you see some stuff like in South America that reminds you a lot of the Lemurian Asian cultures. And then you go to the opposite side, it reminds you a lot of like non-Asian, like, oh, this is a different influence. So that's a hypothesis. But
it's right in the middle, I mean, it makes sense that there would be, a crossover.
Yeah. So and a lot of because I interviewed with some megalithic explorer YouTube channel hosts, and a lot of the early chiefs, they had blonde hair. They're blonde Asians or blonde Native Americans, whatever you want to call them.
That ties a lot into Dan works with the Bach saga.
Yeah.
And there's some ties in there that I'm hearing. I'm sure Dan made those connections a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Dan, if you ever go to Washington, if you guys go to Washington, everybody who comes to Washington.
I was born in Port Angeles.
Okay, well then you should go to Palouse Falls.
Where's
Palouse
that
Falls. Oh my goodness. If you live in Washington, everybody should go to Palouse Falls Park. And it's really hard to find, but you basically go towards Spokane, and they don't really have direction, but you just kind of drive in the direction of where it's supposedly Palouse Falls Park is. And you just drive forever for like an hour, 2 hours in the middle of nowhere. You follow one road, and then you eventually drive right into Palouse Falls.
Oh, wow.
And Palouse Falls is a park in Washington, and it looks like the Grand Canyon. And you can find it on their website, the government website. And basically, there was a mega flood, geological evidence that proves this as a fact. That because it kind of carves into a big circle amphitheater, but and it looks like Grand Canyon. And basically, what happened is there was a mega flood 13,000 years ago that came through. It carved out a kind of a semicircle in the Palouse area of Washington, took out a huge citywide area, which they now call the Scablands. Which, if you take a helicopter tour, you're going to go and look at it. It's huge. They look like water recessing into the ocean, but it's a citywide aerial view of land looking like water resetting into the ocean. But so that's physical evidence that there was a megalithic flood proportion that basically created a Grand Canyon size amphitheater in Washington 13,000 years ago. And if you look at some of my other interviews, I show pictures of that as well. But that's what everybody should go to look at is Palouse Falls, and that falls right in line with all the Lemurian folklores of it happening over 10,000 years ago, over 12,000 years ago. Right into that.
Is there any connection between Atlantis and Peru? South America?
I haven't really gone into, and because there's no Buddhist folklores of that I've come across. Most of the Buddhist folklores, because I remember I work on Buddhist folklores from my upbringing and studying Buddhist folklores, getting bored of studying basic Buddhism. I got into the mandalas work, and then I got into the Lemurian folklores coming out of the Buddhist canon. But I wouldn't be surprised if there is some influence from Atlantis. Like I said, the Americas is a mixture of both sides of the ocean.
Okay.
So
is there any like stories or artwork of what these Lemurians might have looked like?
yeah, they were giants that had they're basically blonde hair, blue-eyed Asians that are giants.
Okay.
Or red hair. In the pyramids of China, they have in secret mummies, but you can probably find it because some people have taken pictures and put it on the internet. But they have the ancient mummies who are like 10 or so feet tall, and they have red hair or blonde hair.
Is there any use of psychoactive plants or like any cool like plants that tie to old? I mean, you have plumeria, which is an absolutely amazing flower that smells like some sort of heaven. But I love plants, and I was wondering through the folklore studies, have you found any cool use of plants or any connection to plant medicine that ties into this?
I haven't gotten into the medicinal part. I know plumeria is the flower of Laos.
Oh.
Yeah, plumeria is the flower of Laos. But if you go throughout Laos, there isn't many plumeria growing wild, which is kind of funny.
Well, it's Lemuria with a P in front of it. I mean, it's just like
yeah,
it's
yeah,
right there,
yeah.
you know?
So it's a plant that's not abundant in Laos, but it is the national flower of Laos. Is plumeria.
Well, we got to go plant some plumeria trees over there.
Yeah, I guess and the dirt is red, just like Hawaiian dirt.
Oh, wow.
Red too. Yeah, the dirt is red. But you know, here's the thing on a side note, because I do from my Buddhist Mandalas book series, which I hope to finish the third book so I can finally get to the Pyramid Megalith book, which is on hold because of current world events. But with the Buddhist Mandalas, people read the Buddhist Mandalas book series and they think they've already had their awakening, and they have even opened the door to even more levels of consciousness, and the freak show aspect of reality hits them even more, so that they're now like babies all of a sudden, like, I thought I was awakened, and I thought I was having a sixth sense already, and I thought I was good, and then I read the book and I'm like, I don't know shit.
I'm gonna definitely swoop them up. I'm excited to actually read them.
Yeah. And so I get a lot of people like, oh yeah. Yeah, I was like, oh well, you know what? It's not a one-time thing. Okay, it's not a one-time thing. Awakening is not a one-time thing. It's awakening, just to demystify what it is. Yeah, it's to basically see is awake within the matrix. You see more of reality because your frequency is higher. You just keep raising your frequency through your choices and intentions and how you live your life, and picking which timeline and which reality you want to experience. And just navigating the matrix, navigating samsara. And so you're just raising your energy field. Okay, that's all awakening is just you see more reality because you're raising your frequency. That's all it is.
Yeah, and cleaning it up and raising it and just doing the work. The work. It's the work. Oh.
It's the work. Okay. You can go and take a bunch of retreats and this and that, but if you don't do the work, you're not going to get the personal resonance. You're not going to raise your frequency. Okay. You can do as many meditations as you want, but if you don't clean up your consciousness, you address your dense issues, your mommy daddy issues, your issues with society, blah, 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 the things that are holding down your perspective on samsara, you're holding on your perspective with your relationship to God or consciousness, all those things. If you don't clean up that stuff, you're not going to be moving forward with a clean plate and a more wise version or insight of reality. So there's a whole thing. And so oftentimes when people go, I read Buddhist mandalas, I'm starting to have these freak out issues, and first, how can I get a hold of my sixth senses so they don't take over? So I work with a lot of people who have sixth senses because they have opened up their consciousness to the greater reality. And so, I'll have consultations with people around the world. I'll give you some examples. So I had this college student who loved this stuff, and then she decided to read Buddhist mandalas. She read Buddhist mandalas, and she's always been psychic growing up, kind of feeling people's health and energy. But now all of a sudden she can see people's auras all the time. She can see the aura field of the TV, her radio, everything, plants, animals. It's just like a psychedelic trip all the time. And it's very, very distractive. She's always wearing glasses. She doesn't want to be around people or go out anywhere because it's a sensory overload. She couldn't sleep because she can hear it, just hear everything. And so, she went to a psychologist. They gave her meds saying that you're going crazy. You could hear some meds, all that kind of stuff, but it never worked. And then she watched one of these fabulous podcasts, came across my material and said, "I'm going to just try this." And so she, I talked to her and she said, "Are you going to think I'm crazy?" And I said, "No, but go ahead." And then she told me, I said, "Oh, okay. So you are raising your frequency and now your sixth sense is even more heightened." So I worked with her and I gave her some recommendations. And so now she's able to exist in life, do her job, be out amongst people and not have the sensory overload. Now she's got it under control. It's kind of like a child that all of a sudden grows a foot over the summer and becomes, klutzy all of a sudden. Well, it doesn't make you special. It just means that you're a little bit taller and you're a little klutzy. So you have to learn how to live within your new body in a very short period of time. And same exact thing over six senses. We all have it, but we haven't activated them all. When we activate them, we have to learn to master our abilities as another aspect of who we are and how we exist within the world. So that's what she did. And then, follow up, she said, "Now I'm starting to see these dark patches in people." And I said, "Well, why don't you talk to those people and see what the dark patches are about?" And it happened to be that's their pain. So if they have a shoulder pain, there's a darkness around their energy field, around the shoulder, et cetera, et cetera. So I said, "Well, there's about 8 billion or so people in the world, and they happen to be in your presence as probably part of the pre-life plan, that there is no accident. They're in your presence for a reason of the 8 billion people that could be in the world around. So just, if you don't feel anything telling you not to, go ahead and give them energy healing. Just imagine the black spot gone. Pull it out of their energy field in your mind. Just pull it out, connect your heart and just have your crystalline consciousness, have God just clear it out of their aura field and then talk to them." And she started doing that. And people were like, "Oh, I don't feel that pain in my shoulder anymore. That thing's been bugging me forever." And I said, "Don't worry about it. If it was part of their pre-life plan to have that pain, it will come back. They'll find a way to bring it back." Okay. So that's what she does now. She walks around basically just healing animals and just healing everything in her presence. And now, her and her boyfriend, they are trying to move out of LA to go into the Midwest to kind of have a much more organic lifestyle and start a healing retreat along with her work from home job. But the other thing that's interesting too is that she said that she started seeing people in her family who got the COVID vaccine, that their life force was starting to, some of them, their life force was starting to dim because she could see aura fields. And so they used to be very bright and now they're dimming. And when they're completely dim, they die.
Wow.
Okay.
So
the light goes out, the energy goes out. Then they cross over. But when they cross over, it's not this sad thing. It's just now their energy field is of a different frequency and now they exist in that realm with spirit. Okay. So those are the six senses that happen when you come into another further awakening and ascension of your frequency. Ascension is, again, another one of these buzzwords that is misunderstood. But in Buddhism, ascension is just ascending, raising your frequency, raising your vibration from your consciousness and your intentions and how you create your next best reality based off of your intentions, thoughts, feelings, and action. Because there needs to be action to manifest and create those next best experiences. And then, of course, the universe will conspire and put things in place if that's where you want to manifest and move into that timeline or that parallel reality. But when people come into it, they're like, "Oh, well, that totally makes sense." So it's never an ending place to be. I was like, no, there's never an end. Okay, there's never somebody's going to come out of a spaceship and take you to the fifth dimension, to another place out there somewhere. No, Consciousness is much more sophisticated than that. Much more sophisticated than those physical 3D interpretations of how things are in terms of what is awakening, what is ascension. No, the sophisticated level has always been around. It's been in Buddhist mandalas and all these artwork in all these megalithic ancient temples and pyramids all over the place. They all talk about enlightenment. And the enlightenment is that you are energy and you have dominion over the physical reality. And your dominion over the physical reality is what, based off of your consciousness level and energy field, will take you to your next best parallel experience in a different timeline. And everybody's going to go to the one that's a fit for them. There might be some crossover, but eventually, if they don't match your frequency or you don't match theirs, you're not going to have those parallel experiences with each other. They're going to move to a different version. Okay, so that's Ascension.
That's the good work right there.
Yeah, that's Buddhism in the fifth dimension. That's my other podcast for Merkaba Chakras. Okay, that's your awakening. Okay, no one's going to save you.
No.
Okay, how can you save a demigod?
You might be able to. I'm sure you've done your work of saving people, but that's not saving people. That's working with and
yeah, that's just compassion. That's compassion.
Yeah, exactly.
Like saving somebody who's going to drown is compassion in action. Okay,
maybe meant to be,
and maybe part of the life plan. Maybe, but in terms of saving you from reality or from a negative timeline or anything else, you can be exposed to the material, but if you don't do the work, you're not going to reap the fruit of it.
I'm gonna ask a question then on this because I'm not super keen on the complete reincarnation cycle on the Buddhist side. I know it's a thing, right? And so is it just this multiplicity of just continuous repetition until you make the work, or is there like a threshold on that, or what's your belief system with the reincarnation cycle period?
Right. So basically, it's very simple. If you want to come back into physicality from spirit, you will speak to your pre-life planner, kind of like your tour guide, your travel agent. Well, what do you want to experience? Oh, okay. Do you want to learn some life lessons while you're doing this so that you can kind of grow spiritually, have an understanding of what unconditional love is, have an understanding of forgiveness, have an understanding of whatever it is that you came to do. You want to have some fun, whatever. So there's all these elements when you plan your vacation and your excursions that go along with that vacation. In the spirit world, planning your next excursion, which is your next life cycle, is a big deal. Okay. And so a lot of souls will spend eons just researching through the library of souls experiences to try to go, oh, I like that experience. Let me try to model that one. I like this one. I'm going to try to model this one. And then when they go in to their meeting with the pre-life planner or your tour guide, then they will plan that out. And then if you decide to wake up into the Earth reality, you don't have remembrance because that's part of the game is amnesia on Earth.
You sign up for that.
You sign up for that because Earth is kind of like a master class. Okay, if you already knew it all, then there wouldn't be any fun. Okay, yeah. So you kind of like the little element of surprise of falling in love with the same person you've been married 20 times over again in a different way. Okay,
that's cool. That's a beautiful love story. I mean, that reincarnation soul cycle love story, like pre-planning that. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a sob story right there. I love that.
But most people come back. Most people choose to come back into physicality because Earth is not in Buddhism, Earth is not the only place to incarnate into. Okay. There's other planets, universes, dimensions. You can incarnate into different dimensions within spirit. Okay, there's different experiences within spirit. Okay, you can work on being an archangel. You can work on being there's a lot of different experiences. Just like here on Earth, you can be a mom, you can be a working mom, you can be a dad, you can be a politician, you can be a business person. There's a lot of experiences in which you can spend your whole life.
Tree.
You can be a coconut tree. a coconut crab.
Yeah.
So anyways, there's a lot of experiences even on Earth while you're living that you could choose to be. But even in the spirit world, when you're pre-planning these incarnations, you can incarnate into physicality or you can incarnate into another element of spirit. There's a lot to choose from, and that's why there's never an end. Okay. So, and most people, they choose to incarnate back into the physical experience, usually because of the love for their friends and family. So like they may have like a best friend, or they may have a family member or somebody who's going back into that experience. And you may have outgrown that, but they're like, please, please, I really, really want to work on fixing this issue that's been plaguing me all my life about like my fear of XXX. So I have this idea, but I want somebody to come along with me that it's kind of like my support system. I need my wingman or my wing girl to kind of be there with me. And so maybe as a best friend, as a soul, you're going, oh God, Earth again. All right. What on earth this time is going to get me to incarnate with you so that you can have this experience of being a business tycoon that you really want, so you can overcome your fear of being successful, whatever. So what are you going to get? Okay. So maybe, your friend as a soul might go, well, there's going to be computers, and we're going to be building spaceships, and there's going to be a lot of travel and blah, blah. You try and sell your friend, and your friend might be going, okay, sure. Boom. You guys get reincarnated. You guys find each other. God, it's like we know each other forever. We've just like best buds forever. We just know each other. Like we just met, but it's just almost like we've always been around. You do maybe a past life regression. Yeah, you guys have been best buds a couple of different lifetimes, and you keep going back because you love your friend. You're like, all right, I'll be your wingman this one more time. But it's kind of like that.
It's like 51st dates.
It's like 51st dates. Yeah. And that's a common one that people come back to, is because they're like, forget all the other stuff. That's just the world current affairs in terms of which vacation you want to go to. You want to be Asian this time? You want to be American? Which one, everybody
but
has
always problems on Earth, right? Like, is it as above, so below? Like, is there problems on the etherical realm as well as here? Like, and then maybe people are trying to keep it suppressed here, and then there's people trying to come back and try to like heal Earth. Is that a part of reincarnation at all? Like healing the Earth realm, like the planet itself?
Yeah, every single I call them chess boards or game boards. Every single game board has their own element.
Oh.
And their own obstacles that they're trying to work through and stuff. And actually, in creation, there's a lot of experiences that are extremely peaceful and serene. Yeah. But not every soul wants to go to the perfect place because it's boring for them. They may want to come into a place that has some work to do, so they can feel like they're chipping in to do their service a little bit, help out, because if everything was perfect, you'd be bored.
Music. I think there's some people that need the souls that come back, and they're just like, their goal is to just crush music and just be like, I'm gonna go back and just I'm gonna just make the biggest jazz band, and we're gonna tour.
Exactly. And and like I said, most of the times when it comes, and you guys can all do a past life, future life, life between life regression. I do with my clients who happen to be starseeds, which are reincarnated souls of aliens from different dimensions and planets that reincarnate as humans, and they may have bleed through of their old lifetimes as aliens, other civilizations, but a lot of them also have UFO contact, abductions, stories, and fantasies and dreams about their alien collective, because they're reincarnation of a different alien collective that has come into the Earth experience, and their collective is learning and growing from their firsthand experience as a human being.
Do you believe that there's just is there ever a time that a spirit soul of a human or any living thing by that matter can be just born strictly of Earth? Because like there's this strong push for modern science to like create life in a lab. And I'm wondering if that's like some weird twisted type of soul journey of sorts, or what's up with that? That's crazy.
It depends. Okay, so you can't create a soul. Okay, consciousness creates souls. God creates souls. Now, souls can choose if they want to incarnate into that physical experience that's available. So, like, if you look at many years ago, there was the first lamb or sheep that was created in a lab. Okay, it didn't. Yes, it didn't live so long, but it was perfectly healthy. It didn't live so long. And in my mind, the reason why it didn't live long because it didn't have a soul that incarnated into that body. But all the other sheep did, and that's why they live longer. Without the life essence of any fractal element of crystalline consciousness, God in you, you're just a machine. The life force, the force, is what keeps it going. That's the energy of the universe.
That's why the Transformers need the Tesseract so they could have.
Yes, I love that. Yes, you guys are getting it.
Hollywood is fully informed on the reincarnation process.
Yes,
multiple like old, crazy, occultic, esoteric, magical practices, no doubt.
Oh yeah. Well, my favorite reincarnation stories is the love stories. And my husband and I, we've been married many times. I keep coming back because he keeps wanting to have different experiences. So I'm like, okay, fine, I'll come back. I'll do it again. But so because I'm beyond. That's why I stay very neutral, and sometimes he gets caught up in current events. I'm like, let's just wait a couple of weeks, so it'll die down. There'll be something else. But I come back for him, and I've done reincarnation, and we've been married many different times. We had lifetimes where we were both Nazis, but we were not Nazis. We were debutantes that were pulled into the Nazi regime, and my husband was in charge of doing kind of the finance, budget, bookkeeping to see, well, where do you put the bodies? Where do you put people here for work? How many people do you need to this work? He does the same exact job right now for Boeing. I call it counting beans. You know, how much money do you allocate to this project? How about the label cost here? How much money, resources do you allocate there? All same exact thing. But in that lifetime, he hated the job. He absolutely hated it. He knew what he was doing. He absolutely hated the job. When I would go, and whenever they had trains of new people, I would look for specific ones or two groups, you know, maybe a dad and a son or just some orphan kids, and I would have my my secret minions take them and we'll put them in the ghettos somewhere. Don't tell them anything. Just stick them in the ghettos and tell them where to get food and leave them alone. And then, of course, D-Day happened, all that. But that was that lifetime. I've had another lifetime with my husband and I where I was a mulatto. I was a mixed slave of mixed breed, very beautiful. And my husband bought me in the Caribbean to be his mistress. But of course, we fell in love, or he fell in love with me, and I fell in love because he was very kind. But I ended up, because we had a son, and I ended up escaping with my son to Canada, to North, because I didn't want him to be part of the slave. Even though he had a silver spoon in his mouth, I didn't want him to be part of the slave. And my husband, in that lifetime, he had to make an heir, a legitimate heir for the plantation. And so he married a white woman just to have a kid, but we always stayed together, and I didn't want that kind of marriage, that kind of open marriage where he and I are unofficially together, married, have a kid, and he loves me and spends all his time with me, but he's just basically fulfilling the contract with this other white woman and having a kid there. So I left, and he was brokenhearted and got really sick, and his wife ended up trying to find where I live, and she found me, and I said, I'm not going back to be a slave, and neither is my son. And she said, no, I respect that. Can you come and just visit him? Because he's dying and he's really sad. And so I said, okay, fine, I'll come, but that's the agreement. So I would come and visit, but eventually he got better, and he would come up to the North every 6 months and spend months, half the year with me, and only come back for for business. His wife hated me because of it. And, but he fulfilled his contract. In this lifetime, in past life regression, because I do this to myself as well, the man that sold me in the slave trade, and it's not like a slave trade where you're actually like in chains with, in that lifetime, they parade the beautiful mistresses around in a kind of like a ballroom. So you kind of like ballroom dance, it's kind of like a mixer. And that's how they advertise the women. But anyways, the man that sold me is a friend of my, in this lifetime, of my husband's parents. We went to Barbados to the exact one of the houses, which is now a brewery, a whiskey distillery. And I saw my name in the charter. My husband walked in and we didn't even know the inside of the layout. He walked straight to the bedroom. He went to the bathroom, just like he lived there. I'm like, how do you know where things are? He's like, I don't know. I just had to go. And so we just had some very surreal moments where we're like, huh, why is this island so familiar? This is our honeymoon. Why is this island so familiar? The plantation in which my husband, at that time, inherited, it was in Virginia, in around that area. And that was substantiated in the charter of all the slaves that were sold out of Barbados, including myself. So we, ironically, just going through our honeymoon, ended up falling into an old lifetime in which we fell in love, and in that lifetime. Now, in that lifetime, as a slave, I was telling my husband, unofficial husband, to be really kind to the slaves. So all the slaves in his possession had the ability to get education. They had good health. They were fed well. They, for what you were available to give you, they were given good accommodations as best as they possibly can. I reincarnated again in the next lifetime. Him and I reincarnated again. And at that one, I'm a white woman. I'm a beautiful white woman. But as a beautiful white woman, I had more availability in my possession to make a difference in my employees' lives. However, the kindness stops when they start infringing onto other slaves' masters' jurisdiction. So there was some skirmishes with that. So we had a lot of these different things, and I actually ended up working with a woman who always had this dream of being a slave woman, kind of being sold out through a kind of ball mixer. And her and I was like, oh, I had that dream as well. And then I met her, and she was from the other lifetime. And then another Black gentleman I work with, I met him, and he grabbed my arm one day. He grabbed my wrist one day, and it just felt like fire. I was like, oh my God, get your arm off my wrist. It felt like fire. And he's like, yeah, I feel like fire too. And I'm like, what? And then I immediately had this image of having my wrist burned because I was trying to stop one of my employees or one of my slaves from being brutalized for trying to save his girlfriend. Okay, so but in this life, I met my coworker who was that slave, and that was instant. So you have these weird bleed through moments in your current life when you come across souls from previous lifetimes, because sometimes we like to, I'm going to do XXX in this life. I want to plan some of these critical excursions and elements, but I like to kind of do what people I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
So can we scratch each other's back? So, I mean, that's a little bit of how we pre-plan our life, and we don't have to pre-plan horrible lives. Okay. We may pre-plan them just to get into it, but we can always change the contract. We can always change the storyline. You don't have to follow through with any of the storyline that you set up for yourself. You could change it at any time.
Yeah, that's 100% true. I mean, it's kind of like a simulation, even though that term gets thrown around a lot. It's like, I'm even starting to wonder if like there's just even any limit to the resources that Earth has. Like, if that's just a concept, I mean, not saying I'm trying to ever go and disrespect this beautiful realm like that and strip of, resources, but I'm just saying like there's this, people understand that things can change and manipulate, but yet they get kind of held back in this concept of like, oh no, there's a limit there, because that's what we've been told. There's a limit, but I'm really, I mean, like I've had enough synchronicities and synchro mystic situations in my life to just basically, I'm like, there's no way that I think there's a limit to anything that we're capable of and bound to in a life, especially when it comes to torture, and things that bring a dole onto the spirit and the soul.
Yeah, right. I mean, suffering is suffering. The level of suffering is how much suffering do you have to have before you realize the lesson? I mean,
there's definitely, exactly. No, there's shit that needs to happen to you so you can actually, in order for to get that message to your original, resonance.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, bud, like you remember this? Why are you so dull-headed, man?
Yeah, why you gotta do it over again? How many broken marriages of the same type of person do you have to have before you realize that you don't need this lesson anymore? You're better than this, and you're able to have healthy relationships.
That's
you
deep.
don't need that domestic violence, channel going on all the time over and over again. How many times do you gotta continue to self-sabotage yourself before you learn the lesson? Some people, they need a lot. Other people, just a little touch, that's enough. They're like, I already got the lesson. I don't need it. I'm done. But that's the thing. So there's a whole thing to reincarnation, and it's not required. Some people have never reincarnated. They've always stayed in the spirit world. Metatron, Archangel Metatron. I speak about him because he was in the Jewish canon. Metatron was a teacher, and he's Ezekiel, but one of his names
Ascension.
one of his names is Metatron, and he is associated with Metatron's cube because when he got his initial awakening into spirituality and basically the whole holographic nature of reality from consciousness, he saw all these sacred geometric shapes, and that's what he was talking about. Was talking about this kind of stuff, Buddhist mandala stuff, and so they just named it Metatron's cube because that's what he was talking about. Is they're associated with him, but it's not something that he created. He just discovered the same knowledge in all of creation. So Metatron is an archangel, and he decided to incarnate as a human being to kind of help humanity and see what this is all about. And he realized, God, it's really hard to be human. This is one of the hardest missions I've ever had. It's really hard to be. I can see why they make so much mistakes. I have empathy.
Yeah. To switch it back to Lemuria a little bit.
Yes, they are reincarnated souls from Atlantis and Lemuria that's reincarnated this time.
Yep.
To make sure that this doesn't happen again.
I definitely am somewhere, like I've had one past life regression and it didn't hit me until a year later because, the beautiful human that was, I was giving me this experience told me that I was like, I was kind of I was kind of bummed at it at the moment, but now I think that's silly. But I was like watching like a temple, like I was like a guard, security at like a temple. Mm-hmm. Inside was like some cool, like esoteric cult going on or some shit. And the story of Black Dog comes up to me. And I've always had a love for dogs. I've never had a dog, but I was waiting for the perfect time to get one, always kind of whenever it happened. And I didn't think about it until like a year later when, randomly my friend's brother like had this dog that he couldn't watch because he's a nurse and this dog's too wild or whatever. And it's this black dog, this beautiful pit bull shepherd blend. And we had a bond like I wrote like a song the day I got him and I didn't even mean to. I just, things happened and energy was just so perfect. And I'm like, this is literally my best friend, like to the end. Mm-hmm. And I was told about him in a past life story, and it took me a year after getting him that I even dawned on that happened. And I'm like, wow, like that, she told, I was like, I don't even know. This stuff is so beautiful. I love it so much.
I just did an episode on Merkaba Chakras podcast, which you can find on YouTube, and 5 different video sharing websites and 65 podcast sites, Merkaba Chakras. And I just did an episode interviewing a pet whisperer on how to connect to your deceased pets and loved ones through your deceased pets. And we had this conversation about pet souls coming back to basically be your pet. Like you adopt the pet in your soul circle. You know, your soul group, your pets are part of your soul group as well. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't hear. I didn't. We lost the recording or not. But anyways, back to Atlantis and Lemuria, because it's so easy to get wrapped into the spiritual side of things when you're talking pyramids and megaliths, because a lot of pyramids and megaliths are developed to have that connection with source, with the crystalline consciousness. Okay.
Yeah, I had a few questions because a lot of people will talk about Lemuria, but they'll also say Mu. Is there a distinction between the two? Is it 2 different places? Is one later than the other, or is Mu just like a shortening for Lemuria?
Mu is a short for Lemuria, just like the States is a short for United States.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Moors.
Yeah. Is there a connection between like Moor and Lemuria?
MOORS.
Yeah.
Moors.
You mean the ones in Japan?
Mediterranean, northern Mediterranean, or southern Mediterranean, northern Africa.
Oh, that I don't know, because I don't know anything about that regarding, because it's not written in Buddhism.
Okay. And then
what about Japan though? That sounds interesting.
Japan is in Buddhism, because remember Japan has Unaguni. And Japan is part of Lemuria.
And then I was wondering, was like the Philippine Islands once all like a giant landmass, and then after the flood, you just see the high points of that area?
Yes. So all the islands, according to the Buddhist folklore, Lemuria is basically most of the Pacific. That includes all the islands along the Pacific of today, like Australia, New Zealand, Japan, all the way up there. And it goes even further towards the America. So it's very big, long, huge landmass. And yeah, so that's why when I did my initial research, going, I have a book here. Now I need to go and look at all of the stuff for copyright-free pictures, which I'll talk about in a minute. But that's why 100% of the time when I look at the big islands all along the Pacific Rim, they all have a megalith or pyramid, because they're part of Lemuria.
And was there different, like, distinctive groups of people in Lemuria, and did they go to different places in the other continents after it sank? Or how many survived, or is there?
Well, a lot of them died. According to the Buddhist folklores, a lot of them died because they couldn't make it to the top of the hills, the very tops. Okay, the ones that survived, went to the very tops, or they had access to a boat very quickly and can get into boats and leave. Now, the folklore states that a lot of the seafaring people that ended up inhabiting a lot of the remaining islands that were left after the mega flood, they were bumping around the water for some time before they could find land. So it had ravaged a lot of the continent. Okay.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, according to the Buddhist folklores, it wasn't one ship. It was a lot of ships, a lot of seafaring, and they went everywhere to find land. They went to their old home area. It's all underwater. There's nothing left. They might be a little peak, and that's ended up where they end up settling and starting all over again. You know,
should we start building boats? Do you think we should start? Everybody should have a boat, probably. Do you think the flood's going to happen again?
I don't know about that. I'm not a geologist, but we have boats. But the thing with a sailboat, something you could live in, something you could live in. So the people who had access in the Lemurian times, according to folklores, who had like a livable boat, not a speedboat, but like a sailboat or a livable boat that you could live in for prolonged periods of time, they're the ones who said, "Honey, get your shit. Let's get in the boat. We gotta go. We gotta go. We gotta get away from these waves." And then they just kind of roamed around for a long time. And the same thing happened too in the opposite side in Atlantis, according to the folklores. The people of Atlantis, the seafaring people, the people who were already on boats or had access to boats to leave early, when it all settled, everything settled, a lot of these seafaring people just started migrating around the oceans trying to find land.
Oh, it's
around
crazy
where they're.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. Please keep going.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh no, but they went to Atlantis and they just saw mud. They just saw mud where their families used to be. There was nothing. And so they just roamed around until they could find land. And then they ended up settling eventually into the surrounding lands. That's why you have this diaspora of influence of culture. And same thing with Lemuria. You have diaspora influence of Lemurian cultures all around the surrounding continents. Do
you think like the Asian people are descendants of Lemuria, and that's where like they all came from there and went into like China and India and everything, like the Denisovans or something?
There were probably a lot of them were already over there, right? Like that land mass was definitely
right
on the outskirts, or even maybe some heartland. I don't know.
Well, see, that's debated because that goes so far back in time. But I know that many years ago they did genetic research on some peoples of the Polynesian islands and China and Asia. And they found through genetic testing that the peoples of the Polynesian islands were descendants of the Asian continent. Okay. Which, according to the folklores, from what we have available now, a lot of the megalithic pyramid structures and remnant folklores out of Russia, Tibet, and China in those areas would substantiate that. Yeah, they just eventually moved into the islands, into the tropics. I mean, we do it today. You want to get out of the cold and get into the islands, to the beach, and have fun. We do the same thing.
Yeah. Do you think like maybe that was the Denisovian people that were the remnants of Atlantis, or not, of Lemuria, that made it into the Eastern world? And maybe that's why the Eastern and Western kind of belief systems are a little bit different.
I don't really have a necessary belief in all the different cultures that sprung up outside of the diaspora of the mega flood. Like I said, I just stick to the folklores, and we're using the folklores as a treasure map to substantiate this claim of Lemuria being in existence. And I found 100% accuracy that there is a megalith or pyramid at the top of every single big island in the Pacific, which says that the folklore is 100% possibly true if I can find 100% of evidence that substantiates the folklore.
In the folklore, is there
the time when?
Is in the folklore, is there anything about how that they built these structures and temples and stuff? And
harmonics.
Harmonics. That's what they say in the folklore?
Yep, the folklore is harmonics. And Buddhist folklore is that it comes down to frequency and resonance. You have a certain frequency, and when you play a certain frequency to an object, it basically makes it almost like anti-gravity. And then you can, and then somehow, according to the folklores in Buddhism, once you create that resonance field around the object, then you can somehow navigate to move across long distances to the location that you need. And then when you get there, you just put it into place.
Damn.
We will find, and they're actually doing research right now into harmonics and frequency and anti-gravity. They're doing that right now with small things in labs, but they'll eventually get to the point where they're going to recreate basically what we've already have found hundreds of thousands of years ago.
If they haven't already, and if it's
Yeah.
because there's a large part of me that thinks that there's this, the resonant type of science, like resonant science, is being suppressed on purpose, because there's some sort of, I don't mean to get all like cynical and real dark, but some sort of like spirit force that's here to make sure that people, when they come back into their bodies and they come back into this realm, since they know that they won't remember right off the bat, that if they don't tell them about it, then they won't be able to access the resonant magic and resonance and harmonics and like that kind of like,
right.
There, because it's like it's there's so much suppression on it on a societal level, but there's so many beautiful souls that are constantly, that know about it. They talk about it. People talk about these things that they don't realize is like this, beautiful, like synchronicities, for instance. It's like there's things that are happening in your life on purpose because of the resonance and the soul spirit journey, and if the one page was turned, so I'm like, is there suppression on purpose of this resonance? And if so, it's my life goal to try to peel that page as much as I can,
Right, right. What I will say is there's a lot of naive young souls being reincarnated, because Earth is kind of like a melting pot of advanced souls, young souls, alien souls, Lemurian souls, Atlantian souls. Just it's a whole melting pot. It's like a metropolitan of souls. Okay. Now, depending on their pre-life plan, you might have some young souls who go, I want to be a business tycoon that takes over the world. How am I going to do that? In an advanced soul that knows about consciousness, that knows about crystalline consciousness of source, that knows about the holographic reality, all this stuff that we're talking about on a spiritual level, knows that there is no positive outcome for that route. There's wisdom in knowing what routes to avoid, because there is nothing you already see around the corner. There's nothing there besides more destruction and chaos. Just negative and negative and negative and negative makes more negative. You can't make positives out of two negatives. Okay. However, you can put a positive and negative and then have a balance and add more positive, focus on positive, add the positive, and then you eventually have less negative. The negative's never not going to be there because I need polarity. Okay. It's just the way samsara is created. There needs to be polarity in order to experience this from. And a lot of people don't understand that because they just want to be love and light, and we fart rainbows all the time. But that's not how it is. Okay. Sometimes things stink.
Yeah.
But a wise soul knows that you don't punish a child for being a child who's naive and stupid about certain things.
Yeah.
You teach them. Thank you. You teach them. And you also sometimes have to punish them in terms of making them take accountability, making them learn from the lesson, maybe mitigating if they're like a bully and they just can't see beyond that, maybe mitigating them, like maybe putting some restrictions, some tariffs, some whatever on them, whatever the deal is, but that's playing out on a grand scale with Earth too. It's just part of the Earth experience. You're going to have a melting pot of different levels of consciousness. And that's exactly how Source makes the Earth experience, is that the elder souls teach the naive souls. The naive souls learn through either the hard knocks, or they have wisdom to at least learn from the elder souls. Same thing.
Yes. I have one final question for you, Roman. Do you have any more questions?
What's your opinion on Hollow Earth?
You raise your frequency, you go to Tibet, you find that portal, and you find out for yourself.
All right, I'm down.
My question is, you talk a lot about the folklore and stuff. Is there like a really cool good folklore story that you can share with us to end out this conversation?
Maybe your favorite one or something.
Oh, There's so many. My favorite one is really not a folklore until you experience it. My favorite one is when the naive human realizes that they are more than what they are, and that they're actually demigods playing naive, and they connect to source and go back to the bliss of spiritual emptiness. It's basically it. But I will say, I will have a last message for you. When I do hypnosis and sixth sense consultations, I always get the same message from people, from source itself, and I basically put into these phrases. And this is what source wants everybody to know, regardless of what they pre-plan in their life here, is that you've always been enough. Use the resources all around you to create the life you want to experience. A life full of love. And you can do it.
Excellent. Yes. Love is the answer.
Yes, it is. Frequency, resonance, polarity, understanding, goodness, jelly jam of sweet and sour fruits of the earth. So good. This has been the night.
You're making me hungry. You're making me hungry, man.
I'm getting hungry.
Hey, that's good. That's good. But seriously, Vaughn, this has been really amazing, and I couldn't see any way that this has gone better. We touched on, everything we like to touch on this show: megaliths, spiritual side, reincarnation, everything. So, this
ancient
has been
history,
a blessing.
Lemuria, sunken continents.
Oh.
Consciousness, Christ consciousness.
Yeah.
Roman's having an orgasm over there.
I know, dude.
He had his
hand in his spiritual orgasm. Well, we are lucky enough that a lot of the major players in history with critical information have been reincarnated or chosen to be incarnated at this time, and we're given a chance to make sure that our civilization and humanity at this time do not repeat the life lessons of Lemuria and Atlantis. Because you have especially in the Americas, because the Americas, in terms of reincarnation, and we know this in Buddhism, there's another folklore real quick about the sixth root race. The sixth root race of humanity is a mixed breed of people. A mixed breed of people who are highly spiritual, very wise, and who have basically sixth senses, superhuman sixth senses. But they are wise enough with it that they can be responsible. Okay? And all the monks in their meditations and prayers and everything else about the sixth root race, because the fifth root race was the Lemurians. Okay, maybe even the Atlantians too, but I just know Lemuria. But the sixth root race is supposed to be coming out of the Americas, the continent of the Americas. So, being that many of the souls are reincarnating from Atlantis and Lemuria, if you look at the map of the world, the middle point is North America.
That's crazy. Yeah. You don't think it's going to be transhumanism, do you? Or the technocratic takeover that's seemingly upon us? Because
that's what we're trying to prevent.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to prevent too.
That's what we're trying to prevent, because that will be a repeat of Atlantis all over again, of the technology taking over the people so much that they lost the wisdom and spiritual connection. But that's why you have a lot of Lemurian souls that are reincarnated here as well, or have come here because of political asylum, like myself.
Yes.
Okay. I vibe with that. I would hope to be so lucky enough to be an ancient Lemurian soul, but
you might be an ancient Atlantian trying to come back and undo what you partook in last time.
Oh
do
shit!
you,
I
you
would
might
like
be
that
righting a
also.
wrong. See, you were asking earlier, Roman, why do people keep reincarnating back? I don't know what's the point of reincarnating back. What do you get out of it?
Why am I reincarnated?
Yeah, maybe you
Why
were
in the
in.
fuck?
Yeah, ask yourself. But there are people who had did a wrong and they want a chance to come back and undo a wrong and make right. And this might be that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Uh,
All right.
Wow. Thank you so much.
yeah, thank you so much, Mongo. We appreciate your time. Go ahead and tell the people where they can find you, YouTube channels, books, anywhere that they can get a hold of you. Let them know.
Yeah. So everything is on my website, which is Merkaba Chakras. So just Merkaba, and then chakras, like your 7 chakras. So merkabachakras.com. And you can find it all there.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Go
Thank you
get
for
it,
joining
people.
us.
Go get the books. Do
Thank
it.
you, Fire Tribe, for listening. And remember, wake up.
Wake up.
Just looking for the answers, trying to see if we are in a simulation. Should anyone like seems to be a blur? Yeah, we're just looking for some truth in between lines and lies and the jabs in the skin. Yeah, I'm just looking for answers to our not so distant past. Covered in mud, we're covered in ash. We rise from the ashes to see the light and the truth behind the big curtain on the stage. Just looking for answers behind lost time. Lost time. If everything exists within our atmosphere, then the memory remains. The memories remain. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed. Therefore, the past is there to be discovered. To discover who we truly are. Because we're just looking for answers. To see if this is all just a simulation. And I'm not sure anymore. Life does just seem to be a blur anymore. Will we rise from the ashes?